We finally have a moment, don't we?
Yeah. I love you so much.
The Wyoming Territory was unforgiving in winter, but it had never been as cruel as the man she had left behind. June had run for 3 days, through snow that cut her legs and cold that froze her breath in her lungs. Her dress was torn, her hands were bleeding, and the wound on her side had not stopped seeping since he had put his knife there. She had stopped feeling the pain hours ago. Now she walked because walking was the only thing keeping her alive, and she was not ready to die. Not yet. Not when he was still breathing the same air as her. She found the cabin at dusk, a dark shape against a gray sky, smoke rising from its chimney like a promise she did not dare to believe. She collapsed at the gate, her legs giving out beneath her, her face pressed into the snow. She tried to call out, but her voice was gone, stolen by the cold and the miles. She lay there, watching the light from the windows blur and swim, and she thought that if this was where she died, at least it was not in the place he had kept her. At least she had run. The door opened. She heard it before she saw it. The creak of old wood, the crunch of boots in the snow. Then a shadow fell over her, blocking the last light from her eyes. She tried to lift her head, to see who had found her, but her body would not obey. A voice spoke above her, low and rough, a sound like stones grinding together. "What are you doing here?" She tried to answer, but the darkness was already pulling her under, and the last thing she felt was something warm wrapping around her, lifting her from the snow. She woke to firelight and the smell of pine. She was lying on something soft, a bed of furs and blankets, and there was a fire burning in a stone hearth that filled the room with warmth. Her dress was gone. Her wounds were bandaged. She tried to sit up, panic rising in her throat, but a hand pressed her back down, gentle but firm. "Don't move," the voice from the snow. She turned her head and saw him for the first time. He was massive, the biggest man she had ever seen, with shoulders that filled the doorway and hands that could crush her without effort. She had learned to read men, to see the violence in them before it found her. But this man, his face was scarred, his eyes were dark, his presence filled the room like a storm waiting to break. And yet, his hands were gentle on her shoulders. His voice was quiet. He had taken her in, dressed her wounds, given her his bed. She did not understand. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice a rasp. He looked at her for a long moment, then turned back to the fire. "No one you want to know." She learned his name was Wes, and she learned that the people in the valley called him the devil of the canyon. She learned that he had come to the mountains 5 years ago, that he had been a different man before, that there was blood on his hands and a price on his head. She learned all of this from the things he did not say, from the silences between his words, from the way he moved through the cabin like a man expecting a blow. He gave her food. He changed her bandages. He did not look at her unless she spoke first. She stayed because she had nowhere else to go. The snow had closed the passes, and the wound on her side was slow to heal, and Wes did not ask her to leave. He gave her the bed and slept by the fire, his massive frame folded onto a pallet that was too small for him. She watched him in the darkness, the rise and fall of his chest, the way his hands twitched in his sleep, as if fighting battles she could not see. He was dangerous. She knew that, but she had lived with dangerous men before, and this one was different. The days passed. She learned to move around him, to read the moods that passed through his eyes like weather. He spoke little, but when he did, his words were careful, measured, as if each one cost him something. He told her about the cabin he had built with his own hands, the garden he tended in summer, the horses he kept in the barn. He did not tell her about the past. She did not ask. She knew what it was to have things you could not speak of, wounds that did not show on the skin. One night, the storm returned, screaming against the windows, shaking the walls. She woke from a nightmare with his name on her lips, her body shaking, her hands reaching for something that was not there. He was beside her before she could breathe, his hand on her shoulder, his voice low and steady. "You're safe. No one's going to hurt you here." She grabbed his arm, her fingers digging into his skin, and he did not pull away. He sat with her until her breathing steadied, until the shaking stopped, and when she finally slept, he stayed. She began to see him differently after that. The scars on his face were not warnings to her. They were maps of a life she did not know, a pain she could not imagine. The size of it, the strength in his hands, these were not threats. They were walls he had built to keep the world out, and she realized, with a clarity that made her chest ache, that she had built walls too. They were not so different, she and the devil of the canyon. Two people who had been broken and had learned to survive alone. She asked him one night, when the fire was low and the snow had stopped falling, "What did you do?" "Before the mountains." He was silent for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he spoke, his voice a whisper. "I was a hunter. For men who paid me to hunt. I did things I cannot undo. I killed men who did not deserve to die. I woke one morning with blood on my hands and a name I could not wash off. So I left. I came here. I tried to forget." He looked at her then, and his eyes were not cold. They were the saddest thing she had ever seen. She reached out and took his hand. He flinched, his body tensing, and she saw the war in him, the part that wanted to pull away, the part that was starving for touch. She held on. "I was sold," she said quietly, "when I was 15, to a man who thought he owned me. He beat me when I did not obey. He put a knife in me when I tried to run. I have scars too. They just don't show." His hand closed around hers, gentle, careful, as if she were something precious. "You're safe here," he said again. "No one will hurt you. Not while I'm breathing." The weeks became months. The snow melted and the passes opened, and June did not leave. She worked beside him in the garden, learning which plants needed sun and which needed shade. She learned to ride one of his horses, a gray Mari with gentle eyes. She learned to cook his mother's recipes, the ones he had carried with him from a life he had left behind. And slowly, without either of them naming it, something grew between them. Not words, not promises. Something quieter, deeper, something that did not need to be spoken. The day came when she found herself standing at the edge of his property, looking down the trail that led to the valley, to the towns where she might start again. She stood there for a long time, her hand on the gate, and she thought about the life she could have, the people who would not know her past, the world that would not look at her and see the things she had survived. Then she turned and walked back to the cabin. He was on the porch, watching her, his face unreadable. She climbed the steps and stood before him. "I'm not leaving," she said. He did not answer, but something in his face shifted, a crack in the wall he had built around himself. "You told me once that you were dangerous, that you had blood on your hands, that you were not a man anyone should want." She stepped closer, close enough to see the pulse beating in his throat, close enough to feel the heat of him. "I know who you are, Wes. I know what you've done, and I'm not afraid of you. I've been afraid my whole life. I'm done being afraid." He shook his head, taking a step back, and she saw the fear in him, not of her, but of himself. "You don't know what I'm capable of. If something happened to you, if I hurt you." She stepped forward again, closing the distance he had tried to create. "You won't." He looked at her, and she saw the war in his eyes, the battle between the man he had been and the man he wanted to be. "You don't know that." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the scars that marked his cheek. "Yes, I do." He did not move. He stood there, frozen, as if her touch was something he had forgotten how to receive. She stepped closer, her body against his, and she felt him shake. "I've been running my whole life," she said, "from him, from what he did to me, from what I thought I deserved, but I'm not running anymore. I'm staying here, with you, if you'll have me." His hand came up, trembling, and covered hers against his cheek. His eyes were wet, and his voice when he spoke was barely a whisper. "I don't know how to be good. She smiled, and it was the first real smile she had given anyone in years. Neither do I, but I think we can figure it out together. He pulled her into his arms then, careful, gentle, as if she might break. She pressed her face into his chest and felt his heart pounding against her cheek, felt the strength of him wrapped around her like a shield. The devil of the canyon, the man they all feared, was holding her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. And for the first time in her life, she was not afraid. The man who had hurt her came for her in the spring. He rode into the valley with 3 men behind him, his face twisted with rage, his hand on his gun. He came to the cabin at dawn, shouting her name, promising to take her back, promising to make her pay for running. Wes met him at the gate. He did not speak. He did not raise his voice. He stood there, massive and silent, and the men who had come for her looked at him and saw something that made them hesitate. "She's mine," her tormentor spat. "I have papers. I have rights." Wes looked at him, and his voice when he spoke was low and cold. "She's not yours. She's not anyone's. And if you take one more step, you won't leave this valley." They left. They turned their horses and rode away, and they did not come back. June watched from the window, her hands pressed against the glass, her heart pounding. Wes came inside, closed the door, and stood in the center of the room, his hands shaking, his face pale. She went to him, took his hands, and held them against her chest. "You didn't hurt him," she said. He shook his head. "I wanted to," she smiled. "But you didn't." He looked down at her, and for the first time since she had known him, there was peace in his eyes. "No," he said. "I didn't." She stood on her toes and kissed him, and he kissed her back, and in that moment, 2 broken people began to heal. They built a life together in the mountains, a quiet life of gardens and horses, and mornings spent watching the sun rise over the valley. The people in the towns below still called him the devil of the canyon. But June knew the truth. She had found a man who had been feared his whole life, who had been taught that he was only capable of destruction. And she had shown him that even the most dangerous man can learn to be gentle if he has something worth protecting. The devil did not exist. There was only Wes, her Wes, and she was never going to let him forget it.